Picture this, you're tucked under a blanket, the world outside fading to a hum, and I'm about to take you on a wild ride through history's most jaw-dropping exits. Not the kind of deaths you'd expect noble sacrifices or quiet passings in silk-sheeted beds. No, these are the ones that make you lean forward eyes wide, muttering, "No way that actually happened." From kings who outsmarted poison only to meet a rusty blade to philosophers undone by their own punchlines, these stories are history's way of reminding us that fate's got a wicked sense of humour. So before we dive in, do me a favour, smack that like button if you're ready for some grim giggles, and drop a comment with where you're listening from. Is it midnight in Tokyo dawn in Dublin? I'm curious who's joining this morbid little party. Now dim the lights, maybe crack a window for that crisp night air, and let's step into a world where death doesn't just knock, it kicks the door down. Ready? Let's meet a king who thought he could cheat poison itself. Imagine ruling a kingdom where every goblet of wine might be your last. That's the world of Mithridates VI, king of Pontus in the 1st century BCE, a man so paranoid he turned his body into a walking chemistry lab. Assassination was the name of the game back then. Poison slipped into your stew was as common as a cold. So Mithridates got creative. He started microdosing every toxin he could get his hands on, a pinch of hemlock. With breakfast, a dash of arsenic at dinner, maybe a sprinkle of belladonna for dessert. Over years, he built an immunity that made his enemies' jaws drop. His apothecaries even whipped up a mythical antidote, the Mithridatium, so legendary that doctors centuries later were still chasing its recipe. This guy didn't just eat, he stared down his plate and dared it to try something. But then Rome came knocking and they weren't impressed by his science fair project. After bloody battles and betrayals, Mithridates was cornered, his kingdom crumbling. He reached for his trusty poison vial, ready for a dignified exit, and nothing. Immune to his own escape plan, he stood there like a chef who forgot how to burn. With Roman boots stomping closer, he turned to a mercenary and growled, "Fine, do it the old-fashioned way." A sword thrust later, the king who laughed at poison fell to steel, proving that no matter how clever you are, fate's got a blade sharper than your ego. Next up, a Viking who learned the hard way, never trust a trophy with teeth. You're a Viking earl in the 9th century, striding across the windswept Orkney Islands, your beard practically snarling with pride. That's Sigurd Steinsson, known as Sigurd the Mighty, a man who carved his name into history with a sword and a smirk. He's fresh off a feud with a Scottish noble male Brigte, nicknamed the Buck-Toothed for reasons that'll haunt your dreams soon. Tired of their endless squabbles, Sigurd challenges Mael to a fair fight, 40 men each, no tricks. Except Sigurd in true Viking fashion shows up with 80. It's less a battle, more a slaughter. Mael's head rolls, and Sigurd, feeling like the god of war himself, ties the severed head to his saddle as a grisly trophy. Picture him galloping home, the head bouncing along, teeth glinting in the sun. But here's where fate slips in with a chuckle. One of Mael's oversized chompers scrapes Sigurd's leg, just a nick barely worth a grunt. In the 9th century, though, a scratch is a death sentence. No antibiotics, no bandages, just dirt and prayers. The wound festers. Sigurd falls feverish, and within days he's gone felled not by a warrior's blade, but by the tooth of a man he already killed. It's the kind of irony that feels scripted by a vengeful bard. Mael lost the battle but won the pettiest revenge, proving that even in death a good grudge bites harder than steel. Next, let's meet a general who learned gravity doesn't care about your war record. Meet Pyrrhus of Epirus, cousin to Alexander the Great. A general so good at winning battles he'd lose everything in the process. His Pyrrhic victories were the kind where you limp home battered, wondering if staying in bed would have been smarter. By 279 BCE, Pyrrhus is exhausted, his army stretched thin from years of charging into Roman legions and shouting at elephants to behave. He lands in Argos, tangled in yet another Greek political mess, because apparently he can't say no to a bad idea. It's late, he's tired, but honour, or maybe stubbornness, drags him into one last fight. Picture the chaos his elephants wedge in narrow streets. His soldiers stumble in the dark, and Pyrrhus, the great tactician, ends up sword-fighting random thugs in an alley like a lost tourist in armour. Above him, an old woman watches from her rooftop, her hands gripping a clay tile. She's got no name in history, but she's got opinions and a mean throw. Maybe she's sick of invaders. Maybe she just hates the noise. Either way, she hurls that tile like she's been practicing on stray cats her whole life. It cracks Pyrrhus square on the head. He drops like a sack of turnips, stunned, and some opportunistic soldier finishes the job. The man who dodged Roman spears and Macedonian plots is undone by a grandma with a roofing grudge. It's not the epic duel he deserved, but it's the kind of end that whispers no matter how big your army gravity's got better aim. Next we'll dive into the unkillable mystic who laughed at bullets and poison. You're in a dimly lit Russian palace, the air thick with cigar smoke and conspiracy. Enter Grigory Rasputin, the scruffy mystic with a beard like a bird's nest, and eyes that could make a Tsarina forget her crown. It's the early 20th century and Rasputin's got the Russian court wrapped around his grimy finger, whispering spiritual nonsense to Tsarina Alexandra, while the nobility grit their teeth. He's like that guy who crashes your party, downs your best vodka, and somehow charms the host into calling him a prophet. The Russian elite want him gone. His influence over the royal family is a scandal, his hygiene an insult. So in 1916 they hatch a plan. Step 1, poison. They bake him a cake laced with enough cyanide to drop a bear. Rasputin. He eats it. Grins and asks for seconds. The assassin's jaws hit the floor. Plan B, shoot him. A bullet rips through his chest and he collapses. Success, right? Nope. He lurches up like a horror flick villain yelling eyes wild. Plan C, more bullets. They pump him full of lead and he still crawls toward the door, stubborn as a mule. Desperate, they tie him up, drag him to the frozen Never River and toss him in. When they find his body, his hands are clawing at the ice like he was still fighting to live. Poison bullets drowning it took an arsenal to stop Rasputin, a man who seemed to mock death itself. Next, let's meet a philosopher who found a donkey's dinner too funny to survive. Picture ancient Greece, where stoic philosophers pace in togas preaching calm and logic like it's their job, which for Chrysippus it was. This guy's all about keeping your cool, teaching that emotions are just storms you can outthink. But one sunny afternoon around the 3rd century BCE, Chrysippus stumbles on a scene that cracks his stoic shell. There's a donkey munching on figs like it's auditioning for a comedy. Chrysippus, maybe loosened up by a rare good day, turns to a servant and quips, "Give that donkey some wine to wash those figs down." It's not exactly stand-up material, but to him it's hilarious. He starts laughing hard. Not a polite chuckle, but a wheezing, tear-streaming, can't-breathe cackle. The kind where your ribs ache and your knees buckle. And then he just doesn't stop. The laughter keeps going until his heart gives out and he collapses, still grinning right there in the dust. A man who spent his life telling people to control their passions undone by a donkey and a bad joke. It's like a fire chief tripping over a hose. History doesn't let you forget a guy who dies laughing at his own punchline. It's too perfect, too absurd. Next, we'll meet a tailor who thought he could sew wings and fly. You're in Paris, 1912, where the Eiffel Tower looms like a steel giant, and the air buzzes with dreams of flight. Meet Franz Reichelt, an Austrian tailor with a needle-sharp ambition to stitch his name into history. He's not content sewing suits for stuffy gentlemen. Franz wants to soar. His big idea, a wearable parachute, a coat that unfurls into wings, letting pilots glide safely to Earth when their flimsy planes sputter. In an era when flying machines crash more often than they land, it's a brilliant plan. Franz tinkers tirelessly, sketching designs, stitching prototypes, and testing them on dummies that plummet like lead balloons. His friends beg him to stop, the authorities shake their heads, but Franz is stubborn as a mule. He's sure his coat will work, and what better stage than the Eiffel Tower itself. On a chilly February morning he climbs the tower, his flying coat flapping in the breeze. Reporters gawk, cameras whir, and a crowd holds its breath. Franz waves steps to the edge and leaps. For a heartbeat you hope then the parachute tangles, and he falls straight as a dart hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The crater he leaves is as deep as his dream was high. Franz Reichelt, the flying tailor, aimed for the sky but stitched his own tragedy, a reminder that even the boldest visions can't outrun gravity's cold grip. Next, let's meet an emperor who learned glory comes with a humiliating catch. Imagine being a Roman emperor draped in purple, your name echoing through marble halls. Now imagine kneeling in the dust, a Persian king's boot on your back. That's the fall of Valerian, ruler of Rome in the 3rd century CE, when the empire's edges were fraying like cheap cloth. Plagues, rebellions, and barbarian raids kept Valerian sprinting from crisis to crisis, but he was determined to hold it together. His big mistake, marching east to flex Rome's muscle against Persia's king Shapur, a man with zero patience for Roman swagger. The Battle of Edessa in 260 CE was a disaster. Valerian's army shattered and the emperor himself was captured, a rarity that sent Rome into a tailspin. Shapur didn't ransom him or parade him in chains. Oh no, he got creative. Every time Shapur mounted his horse, Valerian was hauled out to serve as a human footstool, bending low under the king's boot in front of jeering crowds. It was humiliation choreographed like a cruel ballet. Years of this broke Valerian, and when he died, the story gets grim. Some say Shapur had him skinned, stuffed with straw, and displayed as a trophy in a Persian temple. True or not, it's the kind of tale that sticks a brutal reminder that empires rise, but pride falls sometimes onto a very literal knee. Next, we'll meet a king who loved dessert a bit too much. You're in 18th century Sweden, where the air smells of spiced buns, and the royal court is buzzing with Fat Tuesday festivities. King Adolf Frederick, a mild-mannered monarch, isn't out conquering lands or penning grand laws, he's just trying to enjoy his favourite holiday. It's 1771, the last day before Lent, when everyone stuffs themselves silly, and Adolf, bless his heart, takes it to a whole new level. Picture the royal table groaning under platters of lobster caviar sauerkraut, smoked herring and rivers of champagne. But the real star semla buns, fluffy cardamom-laced pastries stuffed with almond paste and cream, floating in warm milk like little edible clouds. Adolf loves these things, and he doesn't stop at one, or two. He downs 14 of them, each one a creamy sugary hug. By the end, his stomach's staging a full-on revolt, but he just pats it like a loyal dog and smiles. Soon, though, the king's groaning for real pains grip him, his face pales, and before anyone can fetch a physician, he's gone. Cause of death. Digestive problems, the court says politely, but let's call it what it was, a fatal love affair with dessert. Sweden's shocked 1 minute they've got a king the next, he's been outdone by a pastry posse. It's absurdly poetic, a ruler undone by the luxury he craved, leaving history to snicker over his semla-fueled send-off. Next, we'll meet a philosopher who might have just decided breathing wasn't worth it. Step into ancient Greece, where Diogenes of Sinope lives like a human middle finger to society. This guy's a cynic philosopher, which means he's all about ditching possessions, manners and shame. He sleeps in a clay jar, wears the same ratty tunic daily, and roams Athens trolling the rich and powerful. Once he strolled through the streets with a lantern at noon, claiming he was searching for an honest man. When Alexander the Great, the world's biggest big shot, offered him anything he wanted, Diogenes snapped, "Move, you're blocking my sun." That's the vibe. So how does this crusty legend check out? The stories clash, but one's too perfect to ignore. Diogenes, fed up with the world's nonsense, just stops breathing. On purpose. Like he's saying, "I'm done with this circus, catch you never." Some call it a final act of sheer willpower. Others say he was just stubborn enough to prove he could control his own exit. There are tamer tales, raw octopus poisoning a dog bite, but the breath-holding fits his brand. This is the guy who flipped off kings and laughed at rules. When he died, Athens, the city he mocked, gave him a tomb anyway, because even they couldn't deny his grit. Diogenes left the world as he lived loud, weird, and entirely on his terms. Next, we'll meet a Roman so rich he choked on his own wealth, literally. You're in Rome, 53 BCE, where wealth flows like wine and Marcus Licinius Crassus is drowning in it. This guy's not just rich, he's the kind of rich that makes other millionaires feel like street vendors. He owns silver mines, vast estates, even Rome's fire brigades, which he uses to extort burning properties for a quick sale. A real estate shark with a toga. But Crassus isn't satisfied with gold. He wants glory, the kind Julius Caesar and Pompey have carved in blood. So he sets his sights on Parthia Rome's wealthy eastern rival, thinking, how hard can it be spoiler very? He marches his army into the desert, straight into a Parthian trap. Their archers and cavalry shred his legions, his sons killed, and morale collapses faster than a shoddy aqueduct. Crassus captured faces the Parthians, who know his reputation as Rome's walking coin purse. Their king with a flair for the dramatic decides on a fitting end they pour molten gold down Crassus's throat. Imagine a liquid wealth searing his lungs, a brutal metaphor for his greed. Whether it's true or a spiced-up tale, it spread like wildfire across Rome. The richest man in the empire choked out by his obsession. It's less an execution, more a performance whispering to every ambitious soul, chase gold too hard and it'll burn you from the inside out. Next, let's meet a gladiator who turned kitchen knives into an empire's nightmare. Picture yourself in a Roman gladiator school 73 BCE, where the air smells of sweat and despair. Spartacus, a Thracian soldier turned slave, isn't here for the glory of the arena, he's here to survive. Beaten, chained, fed scraps, he's got no illusions about Rome's honour, so he plots. With 70 fellow gladiators, he grabs kitchen knives and whatever's sharp breaks free and bolts into the Italian hills. What starts as a jailbreak snowballs into a rebellion. Thousands of runaway slaves and outcasts join him, turning Spartacus into Rome's worst headache. For 2 years, he outsmarts legions, humiliates generals, and sends the Senate into a panic. He's not just running, he's fighting for a world where no one's a footnote. But Rome doesn't play nice when embarrassed. Enter Crassus, yes, molten gold Crassus, who's tasked with crushing this upstart. In southern Italy, Spartacus's army outnumbered and starving faces its end. No surrender, though. Spartacus charges straight for Crassus, hacking through soldiers like a man with nothing left to lose. Stabbed bleeding, he keeps swinging until the battle swallows him. His body's never found, no parade, no trophy, just gone. Rome crucifies 6,000 of his followers, but they can't erase him. Spartacus, armed with a kitchen knife, nearly broke an empire, leaving a name that echoes louder than any emperor's crown. Next, we'll meet a general who faced death with a quip and a shrug. You're in the Roman Republic, late 80s BCE, where civil war's brewing like a bad stew, and senators plot over wine like it's a full-time job. Lucius Junius, Brutus Damasippus, isn't a legend like Caesar, but he's a solid general loyal to Marius in the bloody Marius-Sulla rivalry, think political debate but with swords and entire armies. When Sulla storms back from the east, his enemies, including Damasippus, are rounded up in a purge that's less spring-cleaning and more bloodbath. Arrested, sentenced to death, Damasippus is marched to his execution alongside other doomed Marian loyalists. The air's thick with fear, one guy's sobbing, begging for mercy, his voice cracking like dry twigs. Damasippus, though, he's had enough of the drama. He turns, fixes the guy with a stare and laughs. "Why weep, fool? Did you not know what business we came here for?" It's not a speech, just a razor-sharp quip dripping with sarcasm. No grovelling, no regrets, just a man facing the blade like it's a tedious meeting he's ready to leave. The executioner's axe falls, and Damasippus exits with more swagger than most emperors muster in a lifetime. His name fades, but that one-liner, it's carved into history's memory proof that sometimes a shrug and a smirk outshine a crown. Next, let's meet an emperor who turned Rome into a circus and paid the price. Step into Rome 37 CE, where Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus Caligula to you starts his reign like a golden boy. The crowds adore him, the army's ready to die for him, and he's got the pedigree of a war hero's son. But fast forward a few years and the guy's gone full fever dream. Caligula's declaring himself a god demanding worship, and appointing his horse Incitatus as a senator, complete with a marble stable and a jewelled collar, probably better behaved than half the Senate. He executes senators for blinking wrong, declares war on the sea god Poseidon, and orders his troops to collect seashells as war spoils. It's not just mad, it's performance art with a body count. By 41 CE, even his Praetorian Guard, his own security detail, are done dodging his whims. They've had enough of his tantrums and theatrical punishments. So they corner him in a palace corridor, no grand speeches, no last stand, just a flurry of blades. Over 30 wounds, they say, like they were making sure he wouldn't pop back up. His body's tossed in a shallow grave, no honours, no fanfare. Caligula, who once tried to outshine the gods, ends as a bloody footnote, betrayed by his own, probably muttering something about his horse doing a better job. Rome moves on, but his name, it's synonymous with chaos, proof that even emperors can't outrun a fed-up bodyguard. Next, we'll meet a duke who picked a very liquid way to go. You're in 15th century England, where the Wars of the Roses make family reunions look like knife fights. George Plantagenet, Duke of Clarence, is right in the middle, brother to King Edward Thos and future Richard III. He's got royal blood, a shot at the throne, and ambition so big it's practically wearing a crown of its own. Problem is, George can't pick a side. He flips between factions faster than a medieval weather vane, plotting rebellions, cozying up to whoever's winning and racking up enemies like unpaid bar tabs. By 1478, Edward's had enough of his brother's backstabbing, sometimes literal, and hauls him in for treason. Execution's tricky. Killing your own kin looks bad in the court of public opinion. So legend says George gets a choice in how to go out. His pick drowning in a barrel of Malmsey wine. Yep, you heard that right. A vat of sweet sticky booze becomes his final curtain. Whether it was his actual request or a dark joke spun by chroniclers, it's peak. George extravagant, messy, and a touch ridiculous. Picture him sinking into the wine velvet doublet, soaked, maybe even taking a final swig. He's buried in Westminster Abbey, probably sober by then, but forever etched in history as the Duke who turned treason into a tipsy tragedy. It's the kind of exit that makes you wonder if he laughed on the way down. Next, we'll meet a genius who cared more about circles than his own survival. It's 212 BCE in Syracuse, and the cities under siege Roman soldiers flooding the streets like ants on spilled honey. Amid the chaos, Archimedes, the greatest mind of ancient Greece, is hunched over a patch of sand, sketching geometry, like the world's not burning around him. This guy's a one-man think tank, levers, pulleys, war machines, even legends of setting Roman ships ablaze with giant mirrors. But right now, he's lost in his circles, calculating spirals, or some cosmic truth about catapults. A Roman soldier stomps up sword, glinting, probably expecting surrender, or at least a polite hello. Archimedes. He barely looks up, waving a hand and muttering, "Do not disturb my circles." It's not defiance, it's obsession. The soldier may be offended, maybe just confused by this toga-wearing nerd doesn't hesitate. One quick thrust and Archimedes is gone, sprawled beside his sandy diagrams. When Roman general Marcellus hears he's livid, Archimedes was supposed to be spared his brain, too valuable to waste. But brilliance doesn't stop blades, especially when you're more loyal to math than your own neck. It's poetic in its tragedy. A man who measured the universe felled by a grunt who couldn't spell hypotenuse. History keeps his name alive, but those circles, they vanished with the tide. That wraps our tales of epic deaths. Next, we'll explore the ancient libraries that tried to hold the world's wisdom. You've just wandered through a gallery of history's wildest exits, where kings and rebels met fates as bizarre as they were final. Now let's shift gears. Imagine a world where knowledge was as precious as gold guarded in temples and scratched onto clay. We're diving into the story of ancient libraries, those fragile vaults, where humans tried to pin down their wisdom before time or fire could steal it. From Nineveh's clay tablets to Alexandria's scroll-stuffed halls, these weren't just dusty rooms, they were the beating heart of civilizations pulsing with math myths and medicine. Picture yourself unrolling a papyrus, the air thick with ink and ambition, knowing one spark could erase centuries. It's a tale of brilliance and loss of people who believed ideas could outlive empires. So settle in, maybe grab a fan for that soft hum, and let's start with a king who collected stories like trophies. Hit that like button if you're ready and drop a comment, where are you listening from tonight? Let's begin. You're in Nineveh around 650 BCE, where the Neo-Assyrian Empire sprawls like a lion basking in the sun. King Ashurbanipal, self-proclaimed king of the world, isn't your typical warlord stacking skulls. He's got a quirk: he loves books, or rather clay tablets heavy as bricks, and etched with wedge-shaped script. This guy's palace isn't just for feasting. It's home to the world's first great library, a treasure chest of over 30,000 tablets. Imagine shelves groaning with texts on astronomy, medicine, love poems, even exorcism how-tos. The Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest hero saga, sits here, its hero wrestling fate in careful cuneiform. Ashurbanipal didn't just hoard, he read, boasting he could crack ancient Sumerian and Akkadian languages already dusty in his day. His scribes scoured the empire, borrowing text from temples, and scholars copying them like obsessive archivists. But empires fall, and in 612 BCE, Nineveh burns. Here's the twist: that fire baked the tablets hard, locking their words in time. Thousands of years later, archaeologists dig up this clay time capsule, finding a king's dream of eternal knowledge stubborn as the desert itself. It's a reminder ideas can outlast swords if you're lucky with the flames. Next, we'll visit Egypt's sacred scriptoria, where words were divine. You're standing in ancient Egypt, where the Nile's breath hums through papyrus reeds and temples pulse with secrets. Welcome to the House of Life, a sacred blend of library, temple and scriptorium tucked within complexes like Abydos or Edfu. These aren't public reading rooms, but elite sanctuaries where priests and scribes guard knowledge like it's the heartbeat of the gods. Picture dim chambers, the air heavy with incense as scribes hunch over papyrus scrolls, their reed pens scratching hymns, medical cures and spells from the Book of the Dead. Every hieroglyph is sacred, tied to Thoth, the god of wisdom, and a single misstroke could anger the divine. Scrolls fragile as whispers are stored in wooden boxes or clay jars labelled with string tags, safe from the river's damp kiss. The Ebers Papyrus, a medical tome brimming with remedies and incantations, was likely born in a place like this, copied with the precision of a prayer. Access is tight, only priests and royals get a peek. because knowledge here isn't just power, it's divine currency. When invaders like Persians or Romans come, these scrolls burn or rot, but fragments slip through, buried with mummies or traded across seas. Egypt's wisdom, delicate as papyrus, clings to life, whispering through the cracks of time. Next, we'll explore Babylon's libraries, where stars and clay hold the universe's secrets. You're in ancient Babylon, where ziggurats pierce the sky and the Tigris murmurs secrets. Forget dusty bookshelves here. Knowledge lives on clay tablets stacked in temple libraries like Azagala and Azida. These aren't just archives. They're cosmic blueprints mapping the will of gods and kings. Pre-scholars called Umanu aren't your average scribes. They're astronomers, mathematicians and healers, scribbling everything from star omens to algebra. The Enuma Anu Enlil, a massive tablet series, tracks centuries of eclipses and planets, predicting wars or harvest like a celestial weather report. Kings consult these before battles or coronations, treating each tablet like an oracle. Then there's Plimpton, 322, a clay slab with trigonometry so advanced it feels like it time-travelled from a calculus class. Tablets are tucked into clay jars or wall niches labelled with cuneiform do not steal warnings, ancient copyright basically. But Babylon's glory fades under Hittites, Persians, Greeks. Libraries crumble, tablets shatter, yet the desert's dry embrace saves some. Archaeologists later unearth these fragments, finding recipes, laws and star charts etched by minds who saw the universe in clay. It's proof that even when empires fall, their ideas can whisper through the dust. Next, we'll visit Alexandria, where a library dreamed of holding the world's mind. You're in Alexandria 3rd century BCE, where the Mediterranean sparkles and the city hums like a cultural supernova. Founded by Alexander the Great, this Egyptian-Greek hub is home to the Great Library, a dream in stone and papyrus. Nestled in the Mushan, a temple to the muses, it's not just a building, it's a quest to hoard every scrap of human thought. Picture shelves sagging under 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls, stuffed with Homer's epics, star charts and Indian treatises. Ptolemaic kings like Ptolemy II send agents to snatch texts from ships, copying them with a wink and a bribe. Scholars here don't just read, they dissect comparing versions, sniffing out errors, crafting the first critical editions. Eratosthenes, a librarian, measures Earth's circumference with eerie precision, using nothing but shadows and math. But brilliance is brittle. In 48 BCE, Julius Caesar's troops accidentally torch parts of the library while fighting in the harbour. Later wars and zealots, pagan, Christian, Muslim, chip away at its scrolls. By 642 CE, it's a ghost, maybe already gone before the fabled order to burn heretical texts. No scroll survives, but the idea does a universal library too bright to fade completely. Alexandria's loss stings a reminder that knowledge is a flame easily snuffed. Next we'll head to Pergamon, where parchment rewrote the rules. You're in Pergamon, modern-day Turkey, 2nd century BCE, where the Attalid kings are building a cultural powerhouse to rival Alexandria. Their crown jewel, the Library of Pergamon, a sleek archive of 200,000 scrolls curated with obsessive care. It's not just about quantity. Philosophers, doctors and historians buzz here, diving into Stoic debates or early surgical texts. Galen, the medical genius, might have thumbed these scrolls as a kid. But Pergamon's real game-changer is parchment. Legend says Egypt's Ptolemies, jealous of Pergamon's rise, banned papyrus exports to choke their rival. Pergamon's scribes shrug and perfect animal skin, parchment into a smooth, durable surface that laughs at humidity. It's a revolution. Scrolls last longer, paving the way for the codex, the ancestor of your paperback. This library's a hive, luring scholars with fat salaries and royal perks, sparking an intellectual arms race with Alexandria. When Mark Antony reportedly gifts Pergamon's scrolls to Cleopatra, it's a romantic flex, but also a nod to their power. Though the library's gone, its parchment legacy lives in every book you hold. Pergamon didn't just store knowledge, it changed how we keep it, proving a good idea can outlast stone. Next, we'll explore China's Han Dynasty libraries, where bureaucracy met brilliance. You're in Chang'an, capital of China's Han Dynasty, around 100 BCE, where the streets hum with merchants and the air smells of ink and silk. The Han emperors don't just rule, they archive, believing whoever controls the past owns the future. Their imperial library isn't a public bookshop, but a fortress of knowledge locked tight for court scholars and historians. Picture bamboo strips and silk scrolls piled high, etched with Confucian classics, census tallies, star charts and legal codes. This isn't just a collection. It's the Empire's memory shaping a culture where the Analects and Book of Rites are as sacred as jade. Liu Xiang, a scholar with a monk's focus, spends years organising this trove editing texts to decide which versions outlive him. His son, Liu Xin, invents an early catalogue sorting scrolls into classics, philosophy and divination. Think Dewey Decimal, but with chopsticks. The stakes are high, the Qin dynasty before them burned books and buried scholars, nearly erasing China's mind. Han libraries are a comeback saving classics from ashes, though bamboo moulds and silk frays. These fragile strips hold more than words, they're the glue of an empire, proving a pen can outlast a sword if you guard it well. Next we'll visit Buddhist temples where texts are prayers and libraries are altars. You're in a Tibetan monastery 7th century CE, where the air's thin and the walls hum with chants. Across Asia, from India to Japan, Buddhist temples aren't just for prayer, they're libraries cradling texts as sacred as relics. In India's Nalanda, a monastic university, monks copy sutras on palm leaves, stacking thousands of volumes on philosophy, astronomy and medicine. Its library, split into 3 jewel-named halls, burns for months. When invaders torch it in the 12th century, a loss that still stings. In Tibet, texts like the Kangyur and Tengyur words of the Buddha and commentaries are carved on wooden blocks or hand-scribed wrapped in silk and shelved like holy artifacts. Copying one is a prayer, each stroke a step toward enlightenment. China's woodblock printing churns out sutras, while Japan's Ishiyama-dera temple guards scrolls in stone vaults buried to outlast wars. These libraries aren't just shelves, they're acts of compassion, preserving the Dharma for a wiser age. When invaders come, texts burn or rot, but monks hide them in caves or memory-letting ideas slip through time's fingers. Buddhist libraries whisper peace and logic across continents, their ink a quiet rebellion against oblivion. Next, we'll mourn the lost codices of Mesoamerica erased by conquest's heavy hand. You're in the heart of a Maya city 8th century CE, where pyramids pierce the jungle and the air hums with ritual chants. Here knowledge isn't just power, it's divine, etched into bark paper codices, folded like screens and painted with vibrant glyphs. These books stored in temple vaults pulse with astronomy, history and cosmology, crafted by scribes who blend art with prophecy. The Maya's complex script dances across pages, while Aztec Tlaquillos paint Amoxcalli books of deer hide or agave fibre with calendars and myths. Even the Inca without writing weave quipu knotted cords that track taxes and tales read by trained keepers. These libraries are the soul of empires, sacred and practical until the Spanish arrive. In 1562, Bishop Diego de Landa tortures Maya codices, calling them devil's lies, reducing centuries to ash. Only 4 Maya books survive scraps of a lost universe. Aztec archives burn Inca quipu unravel under colonial boots. It's not just paper or string that's gone, it's a worldview deliberately erased by zealots who feared what they couldn't read. The silence left behind screams louder than any flame wound in history's memory. Yet glyphs on temple walls and whispered oral tales keep fragments alive, stubborn as the jungles that hid them. Next, we'll sail to Rapa Nui, where stone giants guard a story of resilience. Imagine standing on Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island, a speck of land lost in the South Pacific over 2,000 miles from anywhere. It's just you, the wind, and nearly 1,000 stone giants, the Moai staring inland with heavy brows and pursed lips, like they're guarding secrets older than the sea. These aren't relics of some vanished mystery cult. They're the heartbeat of a living people, the Rapa Nui, who call this 63-square-mile rock home. To outsiders, the Moai are an enigma, sparking wild tales of aliens or lost tribes. But to the Rapa Nui, they're family ancestors carved in volcanic stone, pulsing with mana, a spiritual energy that ties the living to the dead. First settled by Polynesian voyagers, navigating by stars, Rapa Nui bloomed into a culture of clans, chiefs and sacred rites. The Moai weren't idols, but guardians watching over villages, ensuring harvests and harmony. By the time Europeans arrived in 1722, many statues lay toppled the island's forest, gone, its people weathered by change. Yet the Rapa Nui endure their story not lost, but buried, ready to rise again. So grab that fan, dim the lights, and let's step into a world where stone speaks louder than silence. Drop a comment, where are you tonight, and let's begin. You're adrift in the vast Pacific sometime between 800 and 1200 CE, when a fleet of Polynesian canoes slices through the waves guided by stars and the flutter of seabirds. These voyagers, masters of the ocean land on Rapa Nui, a volcanic speck so remote it feels like the edge of the world. They name it Rapa Nui Great Rapa and unpack their lives. Pigs, chickens, taro bananas, and a culture rich with oral tales and spiritual fire. Picture lush forests whispering over emerald hills, the soil rich, the sea brimming with fish. These settlers aren't just surviving, they're thriving, building villages with stone-walled gardens to trap moisture and chicken coops like tiny fortresses. Their society hums with order, led by Ariki chiefs who wield both sceptre and prayer. At its heart is ancestor worship, a belief that the dead steer the living, shaping harvests and calming storms. Clans carve out territories each tied to a sacred forebear, laying the spiritual groundwork for something monumental. The Moai are still a dream, but the seeds are sown, every chant, every ritual builds toward those stone giants. Rapa Nui's early days are a balance of plenty and purpose, a paradise poised for greatness, unaware of the trials time will bring. Next, we'll step into the quarry where those giants were born. You're at Rano Raraku Rapa Nui's volcanic heart, where a crater's steep slopes cradle soft carvable tuff, a stone born of ancient ash. This isn't just a quarry. It's a sacred workshop alive with the clink of basalt chisels and the sweat of artisans. Here the Moai take shape, each one a tribute to a clan's ancestor, a chief whose spirit guards the living. Picture carvers, their hands calloused, chipping away for months, even years, to free giants from the cliff. The statues' faces, long noses, heavy brows, thin lips follow a holy blueprint, their bodies' barely sketched arms pressed tight. Some Moai are modest 6 feet tall, others, like the unfinished El Gigante, loom over 70 feet, heavy as a whale. Nearly 400 statues still cling to the quarry, half-carved, as if the workers vanished mid-strike. Erosion buries their bases, making them look like they're sinking, but they're whole, standing neck-deep in time. Carvers work with reverence, knowing each chip channels mana, the ancestors' sacred energy. When nearly done, a Moai is slid downhill, ready for its journey to a coastal platform. Rano Raraku isn't just stone, it's where human hands and divine spirits meet birthing guardians that watch eternity. Next, we'll explore why these giants gaze inland, guarding their people. You're standing on Rapa Nui's rugged shore, the Pacific crashing behind you, and the Moai loom ahead, their stone faces turned inland, backs to the sea. It's no accident these giants aren't watching waves. They're guarding their people. Each Moai stands on an ahu, a stone platform, dotting the coastline like sacred outposts, often doubling as a burial site for the ancestor it honours. Picture these statues, some 30 feet tall, with deep-set eyes and long noses carved to radiate wisdom and strength. They're not just art. They're vessels of mana, the spiritual energy that binds clans to their dead, ensuring fertile fields and calm seas. Their exaggerated features, high cheekbones, elongated ears scream divine authority, while red pukao top knots quarried from punapau crowns, some like royal headdresses. Once coral eyes with obsidian pupils made them seem alive, activated in rituals where they saw their people for the first time. Facing villages, not the horizon, the Moai are eternal sentinels, tying clans to their land and their past. Every glance they cast whispers protection, a silent vow to watch over generations. It's Rapa Nui's soul carved in stone, a gaze that says, "You are not alone." Next, we'll unravel how these massive statues walked across the island. You're on Rapa Nui, staring at an 80-ton Moai, wondering how a people with no wheels or cranes hauled it miles across rocky hills. It's a puzzle that's baffled outsiders for centuries, spawning wild tales of aliens or magic. But the Rapa Nui have an answer the Moai walked. Sounds like myth, but it's ingeniously real. Picture teams of islanders, ropes of plant fibre in hand, rocking a statue forward in a synchronised sway like shimmying a fridge across your kitchen. Experiments in 2012 showed it works. Curved bottom Moai flattened back pivot, with rhythm and balance walking upright to their ahu platforms. It's not just engineering, it's a sacred dance. Chiefs and priests wielding mana, the spiritual force of ancestors, guided these moves believed to animate the stone. Every step was a ritual, a clan united in sweat and song, proving devotion to their past. No logs, no sledges, just human grit and faith in the divine. The Moai's journey wasn't just about moving stone. It was a performance of unity where physics and spirituality met. Those curved bases still visible whisper of a people who turned belief into motion. Next, we'll see how this devotion turned into a race. that strained the island's heart. You're on Rapa Nui centuries deep into its moai-making era, where the island's clans are locked in a feverish race. What began as heartfelt tribute to ancestors has morphed into a high-stakes contest of pride. Each clan wants bigger, bolder moai to flex their mana, the sacred juice of their lineage, and claim bragging rights. Picture carvers at Rano Raraku chiseling furiously, crafting statues that stretch taller, some over 30 feet with sharper jaws and sleeker frames. New tricks emerge. Pukao top-knots, massive red stone crowns from Punapau pile on symbolic swagger, some weighing 12 tons. It's not just devotion anymore. It's a spiritual arms race where a clan's worth is measured in stone. But this obsession chews through Rapa Nui's soul. Forests vanish, cut for fuel canoes, or fields leaving bare hills that bleed soil into the rain. Crops falter, water grows scarce, yet the chisels keep singing as if a larger moai could coax the ancestors to fix it all. Clans push harder not with swords but with statues, their unity fraying under the weight of rivalry. The island's heartbeat quickens, but it's straining every new giant a prayer, every felled tree a wound. Rapa Nui's golden age teeters, driven by a faith that's starting to cost more than it gives. Next we'll watch this devotion crack as the island unravels. You're on Rapa Nui in the 17th century and the island's unravelling like a worn tapa cloth. The moai, once symbols of unity, have become a burden. Forests are gone, stripped for the endless statue race, leaving no wood for canoes, shelters or fires. Soil erodes, crops wither, and fresh water's a memory. Yet clans kept carving, hoping bigger moai would summon ancestral magic to save them. But the Earth's limits don't bend, and by the late 1600s the unthinkable happens, they stop. Statues lie abandoned, mid-trek, half-finished giants, frozen at Rano Raraku, tools dropped like the carvers lost faith overnight. Then comes the fury, moai are toppled, necks snapped, faces smashed not by storms, but by rival clans. What once bound the island now fuels war over scraps of land and pride. Oral tales call this the Huri Moai, the statue falling time as faith in stone crumbles. A new order rises, the Birdman cult, swapping ancestor worship for rituals of agility and combat. By 1722, when Dutch explorers arrive, no moai stand, and Rapa Nui as a shadow deforested, divided its people clinging to survival. It's a slow-motion collapse born of devotion, stretched too thin a warning that even sacred traditions can break when the land whispers enough. Next we'll see how European boots deepened Rapa Nui's wounds. You're on Rapa Nui in 1722, the air salty and barren when Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen's sails break the horizon on Easter Sunday. The moai lie, topple the forests long gone, and the Rapa Nui people, thin-weathered, greet the strangers with wary eyes. This isn't the vibrant island of old, it's a land already scarred by its own collapse. But the Europeans don't see the story, they see a curiosity. Over the next 2 centuries, waves of outsiders crash in whalers, traders, missionaries and worse. In 1862, Peruvian slavers raid the island, kidnapping nearly 1,500 people, including chiefs and scribes, hauling them off to die in mines. Smallpox follows a grim stowaway, burning through those who remain. Missionaries arrive preaching salvation but banning chants, torching carvings and erasing Rapa Nui's soul to civilize it. The Rongorongo script, a rare Pacific writing system, fades as its keepers vanish. By the late 19th century, only 100 Rapa Nui survive, confined to a corner of their own land, now a colonial sheep ranch. Moai are looted, shipped to museums in London or Paris, their bases sawed off like trophies. The island's heartbeat slows its traditions, whispered in secret, but the Rapa Nui cling to their ancestors' memory, refusing to let the sea swallow their story. Next, we'll see how they rise again, reclaiming their stone giants. You're on Rapa Nui in the 20th century, where the wind carries echoes of a battered but unbroken people. The moai once fallen are stirring again, not as relics, but as emblems of resilience. In the 1950s, Thor Heyerdahl's expeditions, flawed but loud, shine a global spotlight on the island, drawing archaeologists not to plunder, but to study. Restoration begins, moai are hoisted back onto their ahu platforms, coral eyes recreated, pukao topknots rebalanced. Ancient roads and quarries are mapped, revealing a civilization of genius, not mystery. But the real revival comes from the Rapa Nui themselves. Descendants of the statue carvers reclaim their language, dances and chants, passed down in whispers through colonial shadows. In 2017, Chile hands control of Rapa Nui National Park to the community, letting locals guard their sacred sites. The Moai aren't just stone, they're family, and the Rapa Nui oversee their care with ancestral pride. Efforts to decode Rongorongo spark cautious hope, while museums face calls to return stolen artefacts. Today, tourists flock to Rapa Nui bringing cash, but also risk, yet the people stand firm, weaving their heritage into a modern world. The Moai, once toppled by rivalry and conquest, now rise as proof that a culture can endure collapse and still carve its name in stone. Next, we'll reflect on their lasting legacy. You're standing on Rapa Nui 2025, where the Moai stand tall again, their stone gazes fixed on the land they've guarded for centuries. These aren't just statues, they're the soul of a people who faced collapse, conquest and erasure, yet refused to fade. The Rapa Nui's story, etched in volcanic tuff, speaks of ingenuity navigators, who found a speck in the Pacific carvers, who moved giants with ropes and faith, and a culture that turned stone into spirit. Their downfall, forests gone, clans divided, could have been the end, but it wasn't. Through slavers' chains, smallpox and missionary zeal, the Rapa Nui held tight to their chants, their stories, their mana. Today, their revival hums. Moai re-erected, Rongorongo studied sacred sites back in local hands. The statues aren't frozen relics. They're alive, watching new generations dance under the same stars their ancestors sailed by. Tourists come snapping photos, but the Rapa Nui protect what's theirs, balancing heritage with a world that keeps knocking. The Moai's legacy isn't just survival, it's defiance. A reminder that even when the earth cracks and empires burn, a people's spirit can stand unyielding. History tried to silence Rapa Nui, but those stone faces still speak loud as ever. Picture this. It's 1325, and you're jolted awake in a medieval village that makes your worst camping trip look like a luxury spa. Forget Hollywood's shining knights and fairy tale castles. The Middle Ages are a gritty, grimy fight for survival, where you're more likely to wrestle fleas than dragons. If you're cozy in bed right now, hit that like button and subscribe. Only if you're vibing with this journey, and drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's wild to see who's joining us from across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe flip on a fan for that soft hum, and let's dive into a world that'll make you kiss your Wi-Fi router in gratitude. You blink awake, sprawled on a straw mattress that's more bug than bed, the air thick with the stench of damp hay and last week's goat. It's not a bedroom, it's a wooden hut, one room for you, your family, a couple of chickens and an army of insects throwing a rave. The church bell clangs outside a relentless medieval alarm clock that doesn't care if you got 3 hours of sleep. Your blanket, a wool slab unwashed since the last king's coronation, weighs as much as a small pony caked with grime and regret. No memory foam, no fluffy pillows, just a scratchy pile of misery that smells like it was dragged through a barn because it was. You're 22, which is basically senior citizen status here, and your body's already filing complaints. Your spine creaks like a haunted gate, your knees crunch like a sack of gravel, and stretching feels like a personal attack. The air's so cold it bites, and your bare feet hit a floor that's either slick with last night's rain thanks to the leaky thatched roof, or crusty with mystery substances you don't want to identify. Privacy, a myth. Your family's snoring beside you, maybe a random cousin who's been crashing since the harvest, all sharing this open concept nightmare. The smell's a brutal mix of stale ale, human sweat, and something you hope isn't mould, but deep down know it is. This is your morning in medieval Europe, and it's not even 6 a.m. yet. You're never alone, fleas, rodents, and the weight of survival are your constant crew. Congrats, you're alive. The bad news. That's the highlight of your day. So pull yourself from this haystack of horrors, because nature's calling, and it's about to get a whole lot worse. You've clawed your way out of bed, but now nature's screaming, and it's not asking politely. If you're picturing a sparkling bathroom with fluffy towels snap out of it, this is 1325, and hygiene is a word nobody's invented yet. Your toilet's a wooden bucket tucked behind the hut, already brimming, because Uncle Wolfstarn had a wild night with some dodgy turnips. The smell could knock a vulture off a corpse. You hold your breath, do what you gotta do, then brace yourself, toss it into the street. Yup, the street. You're supposed to yell Gardez-vous old French for watch out below, but nobody dodges fast enough. Medieval towns or open sewers, a charming stew of human waste animal droppings and liquids you'd rather not name. If you're in a fancy town with public latrines, don't get excited. You're shoulder to shoulder with strangers in a reeking outhouse, making awkward small talk while praying the wooden bench doesn't collapse. Ventilation's a cruel joke and toilet paper never heard of it. You're wiping with straw leaves or a scrap of wool if you're feeling bougie. Sometimes you just don't. Handshakes aren't a thing yet, and now you know why. Even in a castle, it's no picnic. You've got a garderobe, a hole in the wall, dropping straight into the moat grate until enemies climb up the waste chute. Yeah, that happened. Talk about a backdoor invasion. Every trip to relieve yourself is cold, public, and vaguely humiliating, like a twisted social experiment. One wrong step on a slick path and you're face first in the street's river. You stumble back, itching from fleas, your hands gritty, and realise you haven't even tackled your teeth yet. Spoiler, that's not going to be fun either. Welcome to medieval hygiene, where every choice feels like a dare and you're just trying not to lose your dignity or your breakfast. You've survived the medieval bathroom gauntlet, so surely you deserve a reward like a warm-hearty breakfast to fuel your day. Think again. It's 1325 and comfort food is as mythical as a unicorn. You shuffle to the fire, squatting on a dirt floor that's seen more action than a battlefield, and stare into a wooden bowl of something. Meat pottage, the medieval equivalent of a culinary crime scene. This gloopy grey stew's been simmering in the same pot for days, maybe weeks, tossing in whatever scraps you scrounge, grains a sad turnip, maybe a bean if the harvest didn't betray you. It's less a meal and more a science experiment gone wrong, with a taste that lingers like regret. On the side, there's bread, but don't get excited. This rye or barley loaf is harder than your landlord's heart bulked up with sawdust or ground acorns, because wheat's for nobles who don't know your name. You don't slice it, you wrestle it, praying your teeth survive the encounter. For a drink, no coffee's brewing, no orange juice is chilling. Instead, you gulp weak ale breakfast beer because the water's a parasite party you're not invited to. Kids sip it too, their little faces grim as they chug survival juice. Meat or cheese? That's a Sunday dream, and only if the Lord's in a rare generous mood. Fresh fruit? Only if it's fall and hasn't already turned into wine. Every bite's a gamble. That bread might chip a tooth. The pottage could hide a rat's midnight snack. Spices like pepper are worth more than your hut, so flavour comes from onions, maybe salt, and a hefty dose of despair. You chew slowly, not because you're savouring, but because you're negotiating with your stomach to keep it down. This isn't breakfast, it's a test of endurance. You swallow, wipe your gritty hands on your tunic and brace for the day ahead, already dreaming of a time when food doesn't feel like punishment. Your stomach's grumbling through the pottage ordeal, and now it's time to face the medieval fashion disaster that is getting dressed. Your wardrobe's not a closet, it's a single outfit. A rough wool tunic or linen shift you've worn so long, it's practically a second skin. Seasonal trends. Forget it. This is your look until it disintegrates or gives you a rash that sends you to the priest for an exorcism. Underwear's a luxury, maybe a linen undertunic if you're lucky, but most days you're going commando under layers of scratchy sweat-soaked wool stitched by someone who thought seam meant suggestion. Washing clothes is a fantasy. No soap, no washing machine, just a river you'd have to haul water from heat over a fire and scrub with ashes if the sun's even out, which it isn't. Your tunic's stiff with stains, smelling like a pigsty left to fester, and you're not much better. Shoes. If you've got 'em, they're untreated leather barely holding together, offering less support than a broken promise. Most peasants go barefoot, trudging through mud dung and sharp rocks that turn every step into a medieval minefield. Your skin's screaming. Fleas and lice have set up permanent residence, throwing parties in your armpits while bedbugs nibble your legs. Everyone's itchy nobles monks, even the kids are walking insect farms. You scratch with a stick, a spoon, anything, and nobody blinks. A rash. That's just your body's way of saying, welcome to the club. No dermatologist, no cream, just you and your scabies sidekick for the next 6 months. You pull on this misery costume already sweating and itching and step outside where the real work's waiting to break you. In medieval Europe, getting dressed isn't about style. It's about surviving the outfit. You've choked down your pottage and wrestled into your itchy tunic, but now it's time to face your morning smile or what's left of it. In 1325, oral hygiene is about as real as a dragon's dental plan. No toothbrush, no toothpaste, no floss, and definitely no minty mouthwash to save you from the battlefield that is your mouth. You might chew a twig or swish some vinegar if you're feeling fancy, but most days your teeth are on their own, and they're losing the war. By your mid-20s, your smile's more haunted crypt than Hollywood's sparkle with cavities carving out real estate and gums swollen like they're staging a revolt. That gritty rye bread and sticky pottage. They're not just food, they're tooth assassins leaving decay in their wake. Sugars creeping into noble diets, rotting their teeth faster, but you're not spared fermented bread, and years of chewing hard loaves do the job slowly but surely. Toothaches are your new normal, a dull throb that feels like the weather always there, always miserable. Pain bad enough to make you consider yanking the offender yourself. That's not a joke. The local barber surgeon, yep, the same guy, hacking your hair, doubles as your dentist, wielding an iron hook by candlelight with all the finesse of a blacksmith. No anaesthesia, just a prayer and a scream. An infected tooth isn't just pain, it's a death sentence waiting to happen. Without antibiotics, a bad molar can spiral into sepsis, turning a cavity into your funeral. Kissing. Good luck halitosis is the medieval perfume, and everyone's wearing it. Nobody's judging your smile, though. They're too busy sizing up your land or livestock. Your mouth's a wreck, and you've got no choice but to grit your rotting teeth and keep going. Because in medieval Europe, dental care isn't about prevention. It's about surviving the pain long enough to make it to lunch. Your teeth are throbbing, but there's no time to sulk work's calling, and in 1325 it's a brutal master. If you're one of the 90% scraping by as a peasant, your job's simple: don't die while slaving for a lord who wouldn't pick you out of a lineup. No office, no coffee breaks, just sunrise to sunset labour 6 days a week. Sundays off unless the harvest's late, or your toes turning black from an infection you can't afford to care about. Your tools: a splintery wooden hoe, a rusty sickle and whatever's left of your spine. You're ploughing fields by hand, or if you're rich with an ox that's as stubborn as the mud you're knee-deep in. You dig ditches, sow seeds, pull weeds and haul water until your back's screaming and your hands are raw. Tired. Nobody cares. Mental health day. That's a fever dream. If you're a woman, you're not just in the fields, you're cooking, cleaning, spinning wool and dodging your husband's lice while keeping the kids alive. Kids? They're working by age 5, clutching tiny rakes and dreaming of not catching the flu. Not a farmer. Maybe you're a blacksmith or tanner, choking on smoke or animal guts in a shed that's one spark away from a fireball. Pay barely enough to eat. Perks, blisters, and the occasional near-death experience. Break a bone, tough luck, fever. Chug some warm ale and keep swinging. Stop working, and you don't eat. Medieval Europe's got no safety net, just a quick replacement if you keel over. You grip your shovel, ignore the pain shooting up your arm and keep digging, because this isn't a career, it's a slow-motion fight to stay alive. The sun's climbing, and the fields don't care about your dreams. In this world, labour isn't a choice, it's the only thing keeping you from the grave. You've barely survived the morning's labour, your hands blistered and your back begging for mercy, but now the medieval weather's here to remind you who's really in charge. In 1325 there's no thermostat, no insulation, just a world where the sky seems personally offended by your existence. Winter's a beast. Your hut's wooden walls have gaps wide enough to toss a chicken through, and the cloth windows let in more frost than light. The hearth's fire is a sad flicker, because firewood's worth more than your weekly wages, and stealing a stick from the Lord's forest could get you hanged. You huddle under your grimy wool tunic, breath fogging nose frozen, and fingers stiff as icicles, wondering if your toes will survive until spring. Summer's no better. It turns your hut into a sweaty clay oven. No fans, no breeze, just you baking in layers of wool you can't peel off without scandalising the village or inviting a swarm of flies. The sun's relentless, and there's no sunscreen, just straw hats you weave yourself looking like a desperate scarecrow. Heat stroke's just a bad turn, and the fields don't care if you're dizzy. Mosquitoes hum in your ears all night, and the stench of last week's goat stew festers in the corner. Whether you're shivering through winter's bite or melting in summer's glare, your clothes itch, your food's grim, and work never stops. Medieval climate control. It's a cruel joke just to you the elements, and a prayer to make it through the day without frostbite or a sunburn that feels like divine punishment. You've barely survived the morning's labour, your hands blistered and your back begging for mercy. But now the medieval weather's here to remind you who's really in charge. In 1325 there's no thermostat, no insulation, just a world where the sky seems personally offended by your existence. Winter's a beast, your huts. Wooden walls have gaps wide enough to toss a chicken through, and the cloth windows let in more frost than light. The hearth's fire is a sad flicker, because firewood's worth more than your weekly wages, and stealing a stick from the Lord's forest could get you hanged. You huddle under your grimy wool tunic, breath fogging nose frozen and fingers stiff as icicles, wondering if your toes will survive until spring. Summer's no better, it turns your hut into a sweaty clay oven. No fans, no breeze, just you baking in layers of wool you can't peel off without scandalising the village, or inviting a swarm of